Okay, so let's be honest. Dating apps, they're everywhere you look these days, right?
Yeah, Tinder, Bumble, Hinge. It's like you're not really in the game of dating these days unless you've at least tried one out.
Seriously, everyone's got an opinion about them, but we're skipping the gossip and like actually looking at the science this time.
Exactly. We're doing a deep dive today on a study from the Journal of Behavioral Addictions.
Ooh, sounds intense.
It's called The Psychology of Swiping, a cluster analysis of the mobile dating app Tinder.
Gee.
And get this, over 1,000 Tinder users took part, so we're talking serious data here.
Oh, over 1,000. That's a lot of swiping.
Right. That's not just like a handful of people. This is some real insight into what's going on.
Okay, so what do they find out? What's the juicy stuff?
Well, one of the most interesting things was they found distinct types of people on Tinder, each with like their own reasons for being there.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just everyone looking for a hookup like people say.
Not even close. It's
Yeah.
way more complex than that.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more about these Tinder types. Who's group number one?
All right, so the first group, they called them the regulated cluster. These are the folks who are generally pretty confident, secure in themselves.
Gotcha.
They tend to have good self-esteem, healthy relationships, and they're not like desperate to find a partner.
So they're not on Tinder like with the hopes of finding the one.
Yeah, exactly. They might be open to dating casually, or maybe they just like the social aspect of it.
Makes sense.
Or even just a little ego boost when they get a match.
Who doesn't love a little ego
That's
boost,
for
right?
sure. The main thing is they've got a handle on their swiping. It's regulated, see?
They're not letting it take over their lives.
Exactly. It doesn't define them.
Healthy relationship with the app. I like it. What about group number two?
Okay, so the second group, this is where it gets a bit more complicated. They're called regulated with low desire.
Ooh, intriguing. Tell me more.
So, like the regulated group, they're not glued to the app, but they do tend to have lower self esteem. And they reported having less of a desire for sex overall.
Lower self-esteem and low desire. Makes you wonder if they're on Tinder for validation more than actually looking for someone.
You hit the nail on the head. That's a big question the researchers were looking at.
Right.
Are they looking for a confidence boost from those matches, or is it more about dealing with loneliness? It's like you said, it's complicated.
It really shows how there can be so many reasons why someone might be on these apps.
Totally. Even subconscious ones.
Right. It's like you can't judge a book by its cover, or I guess a profile by their pictures.
Exactly.
So what about the next group? What's their deal?
All right, buckle up. This is the unregulated and highly motivated group, and they are ready to swipe.
Oh boy, I already see where this is going.
You and me both. This group, they've got a whole mix of reasons for being on there. Some are genuinely looking for someone,
Okay.
but others, it's more about the excitement, the validation, or even using Tinder to cope with tough emotions.
I see where the unregulated part comes in.
Right. And here's the thing, they're also more impulsive.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so it's not just about why they're swiping, but how well they can manage it, if you get me.
Totally. So it's like their relationship with the app itself could become an issue.
And the study actually had a way to measure this. They called if problematic Tinder use.
Oh wow, there's a scale for that.
There is. They looked at things like whether using the app was messing with their work, their relationships, if they felt addicted even,
Wow, that's intense.
or if they were ignoring other parts of their life because of it, neglecting things.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's getting pretty deep.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just why someone's on Tinder. It's about the impact it might be having on them.
And I'm guessing this unregulated and highly motivated group didn't score too well on that problematic use scale.
You guessed it. They were much more likely to say they felt out of control with their swiping or were using it as an escape.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to unpack.
It is, but it gets even more interesting, I promise.
You're killing me here. Don't leave me hanging. Tell me more about this problematic use. So before we get to that last Tinder type, I gotta know, is this making sense to you so far? Like, are any of these groups ringing a bell?
I'm so glad you asked that. It's way too easy to hear these descriptions and be like, oh my God, that's totally my ex.
Right.
But we gotta remember, everyone's different, right? These categories, they're more like a starting point, Not like a final answer.
Yeah, makes sense.
So it's cool to think about your own experiences or like people you've met on these apps. Do any of these patterns sound familiar?
Totally. And speaking of patterns, let's talk about that final group, the unregulated avoidant cluster. They sound like the most complicated of the bunch.
You're not wrong there. They're kind of a puzzle. You see this group, they tend to be really avoidant in their attachment style.
So they might want to connect with people, but they're also kind of scared of it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about dating apps, the anonymity, the control, it's like way less pressure than meeting face to face.
It's like dipping a toe in the water without actually jumping in.
Exactly. But here's where it gets weird. This group also said they have a really high sex drive, but like by themselves.
Well, hold on. That's kind of contradiction, isn't it?
It definitely seems that way, right? Like they're avoiding real intimacy, but they still have a strong need for sex. It's wild.
The human mind is a strange and mysterious place.
Tell me about it. And it's like all tangled up with technology and, well, human nature.
Hmm.
And
I've been there.
now instead of just seeing the picture and bio, you can actually think about why they might be on Tinder in the first place.
Okay, that's actually kind of cool.
Right. Are they a regulated type, just seeing what's out there? Or maybe they're more unregulated and highly motivated, looking for a quick ego boost.
It's like you have X-ray vision into their swiping style.
I know, right? It might make you think twice about matching if you thought they were going to be too intense or using the app to avoid dealing with something else.
Totally. But it's not about judging anyone, right? It's about being informed.
Exactly. But even bigger than that, this research makes us ask some serious questions about how we even use technology to connect with people these days, you know?
It's easy to forget there's a real person on the other side of the screen.
100%. And this study, it's like a reminder that they have their own story, their own reasons for swiping. It's deeper than it looks.
Right. And the study itself says that while it explains why people use Tinder, it doesn't really say anything about what happens after that, you know?
Yeah, and that's an important point.
So it makes you wonder, right? Does having all these potential matches all the time actually lead to real connections?
Right. Or does it just make it harder to commit because there's always someone else to swipe on? That's a tough one.
That's the question, isn't it? And it's not just for dating apps. It's like technology has changed the whole game when it comes to romance.
Yeah.
For better or worse, we're still figuring it out.
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And this study, it's not like we have all the answers now,
Correct.
but it gets the conversation started, and that's huge.
I feel like we could talk about this for hours.
Seriously, we're just scratching the surface.
This whole deep dive into like the psychology of Tinder, it's been so eye-opening.
Right.
It's like we've gone way beyond just the stereotypes and actually see the bigger picture of why people use these apps.
And I think what's even more important is we're seeing how those reasons connect to bigger things like, attachment styles and being impulsive, and even how they feel about themselves.
Right. And that can lead to like some unhealthy patterns. And you know what else? It's like people still make fun of dating apps,
Oh, totally.
like Tinder nightmares and all that. But it's easy to forget those are real people we're talking about.
It's so true. And those people are just as complex as anyone else. This research is like a good reminder to have a little empathy, you know?
I love that. It's about understanding, not judging.
Right, because everyone's got their own story, their own reason for being on these apps.
Yeah. And maybe this even makes us think about our own reasons, you know?
Totally.
Like, do any of these Tinder types sound familiar? Have you ever like really thought about why you're swiping or what you even want to find?
Those are the questions, right?
It makes you wonder, in a world with like endless swiping, how do we actually use technology to find something real, like a real connection?
That's the million-dollar question right there.
It really is. And I don't think this study gave us the answer.
It didn't. But you know what it did do? It showed us how important it is to be thoughtful about this stuff.
To be intentional.
Yeah. And to be kind, to ourselves and to each other while we're trying to figure this whole online dating thing out.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been an awesome deep dive.
Totally agree.
I think we've all learned a lot about what's going on behind those swipes, right?
I know, I have.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. But until next time, happy swiping, everyone.